Thank you so much for being here today and for having me. So my name is Rania Mugammar. Assalamu alaikum. I'm grateful to be here with you and to share this space today. I would like to start. Hey, is the big green button? Okay, cool. I missed the tutorial earlier. I would like to start by taking a moment to acknowledge the land that we're on today by remembering and honoring Tina Fontaine, who, for me, has been, I think, a moment in public conversation around not only that our understanding of healthy relationships and sexuality in the world at large, but we're understanding these things in a colonial context. With violent intersections for Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit folk. So I want to take a moment to remember and honor her. I want to also take a moment to call into the room my women ancestors, without whose spirit of resilience and survival I would not be here. None of us would be here if we're not for the people whose bodies, love, and labor bring us into this world. I would also like to say ashe to the survivors who do not indeed survive and call them into this space with us today. Not all of us make it, and I want to take a moment to remember and honor that. Oh, okay, so my name is Rania Al-Mugammar. I work as an artist, anti-oppression, liberation, and education consultant. Primarily, I work in gender-based violence advocacy, contemporary arts institutions, the intersection of social justice and technology, what is known as digital justice, and lastly, in communities and law. I want to start off my talk today with a quote by Lilla Watson, who is a Murray Indigenous Australian visual artist, activist, and academic. This quote is often misattributed to a man in her community, but it is her work. Yeah, in newsflash. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time, but if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. It always reminds me of the importance of doing this work from a place of intersectionality. Intersectionality, to me, is a radical practice. It's the politics of liberation. It is the radical and remarkable idea that we can build a future that includes all of us, that we can build a future you can come to with all of your parts, that you do not have to decide what part of yourself to shut off or to leave behind to get access to community supports, resources, and choices. It is the most remarkable work of liberation to me. Often we talk about it as this theory, but intersectionality is a structural analysis tool and a practice. It is something we can do. For me, when I think about our ideas of consent and healthy relationships and sexuality, intersectionality dares us to center those who are chronically excluded, who are on the outside of the outside. It tells us, asks us the question of, do our ideas of sexuality, healthy relationships, and consent include everybody? Do they include trans and non-binary people? Do they include sex-working women, mad women, women with disabilities, women who are living at the intersections of poverty, chronic exclusion, substance use, all sorts of different things? Do our ideas take into account that they deserve safety too? And for me, without intersectionality, we end up creating systems, institutions, and spaces that say you still don't belong, and this safety is not for you. Freedom from violence is a life that we all deserve to live. I want to also share a quote by Audre Lorde that for me really situates the importance of intersectionality when we talk about everything, the entire work of justice. This quote is often shared in a variety of contexts, but it speaks to me tremendously because I am a Black woman and a mother. She says, "Some problems we share as women, some we do not. You fear your children will grow up to join the patriarchy and testify against you. We fear our children will be dragged from a car and shot down in the street, and you will turn your backs on the reasons they are dying." But mothering as a Black woman has been one of the most challenging experiences of my life, and being a mother to boys as a Black woman has been also one of the most challenging experiences of my life. I sit at the intersection of mothering people who may likely grow into young men and then be afforded the price of power and dominance, and at the cost of beating your heart into submission. And I hope that that's a trade that they do not have to make. I hope that they can have both compassion and empathy for themselves and for others. For me, when we talk about consent culture and we talk about Me Too, we talk about rape culture, and I worry that we often spend so long problematizing and critiquing and not enough time imagining the alternative. If the world was according to you, what would it look like? What do our brave and courageous spaces look like? Like all aspects of culture, rape culture is learned and it can be unlearned, and we can put something else in its place. And we can put consent culture in its place. And for me, consent always looks like I want this, not I can live with this. Consent takes into account power dynamics, the intersectional nature of our identities, all the spaces and communities that we occupy, and gives us the opportunity to make free and informed choices. And to choose for ourselves, that to me is one of the most remarkable things. And consent is something we can practice in our intimate and sexual relationships, but we practice it in all different areas of our lives. I think BK did a great job of speaking to how we are familiar and understand consent in other contexts, but we are so emotionally illiterate when it comes to speaking about consent in intimate and sexual contexts. I also want to talk about some of our bodies. Some of our bodies are sites of violence. I am a Black Muslim woman. Often people, when they talk about violence that impacts Muslim women particularly, and particularly visible Muslim women, and more so if those Muslim women are Black, we talk about this essentialist idea that violence is natural to our communities in particular ways. And we fail to understand that violence, gender-based violence, happens in every single community. Sometimes it wears different clothes, and sometimes it calls God by a different name, but it happens everywhere. Our bodies are seen as places where violence happens, where we need to be saved, but the truth is we've been saving ourselves all along. We know our communities, we know our history, we know how to keep each other safe, we know how to keep ourselves safe, and we know what works and what doesn't. Often I have the responsibility and privilege of consulting on everything from policy to programming, and I see so much targeted programming, particularly around, what was it called, honor-related violence and forced marriage. Some of the language and the problematic approaches around that meant that Muslim women, particularly Muslim women who were new immigrants or with precarious legal status, were not reporting things when they were happening to them. They weren't even seeking any kind of help that didn't involve the police because they were afraid to further criminalize themselves and their families. And I know what it looks like when we have to choose a larger community over our safety and our well-being. We have to create spaces, communities, and institutions that let you come with all of that and don't further push you into the margins. This for me, that went in the wrong direction. I know, it's like the biggest button on the remote too. There's no reason for this. It's not good. So my feminist hero, Kimberl Crenshaw, who further worked on and built on the work of the Combahee River Collective to understand intersectionality, says, when feminism does not explicitly oppose racism and when anti-racism does not incorporate opposition to the patriarchy, race and gender politics often end up being antagonistic to each other and both interests lose. One big thing that I've learned in doing this work is we have to let go of our template for scarcity, and we have to believe in abundance. There is enough for all of us, I promise you. There's not only enough for all of us to survive, but there's certainly enough for all of us to thrive. This year was part of a project I got to work on with Outburst a few years ago, and this was, I love the illustration. Hijabis in Quebec ball so hard, Marwa, when I find them. And I love all the ways that we use art to not only resist the violent conditions of our lives as dictated by the patriarchy, but all the ways that we live at different sites of colonial, institutional, and systemic violence and oppression. And I love how we use art to boldly document and to really remarkably imagine a future that includes all of us. When we talk about getting to a culture of consent, often those of us don't know how a lot of us don't know how we get there. Here is a resource that I made called The Anatomy of an Apology. We're not doing this, okay. All right, so The Anatomy of an Apology. I actually made this because my best friend in the whole world is a white, cisgendered, able-bodied, conventionally handsome, straight, middle-class white boy named Dave. Like Dave, right? So I made this because Dave hit me one too many times with, I'm sorry you feel that way. Right? I was like, file that and they're not a real apology, fam. So I realized we don't know how to take accountability for our mistakes, and we live in a culture where if we make a mistake, you get disposed of, and that's not the way we build communities where consent is really fostered. So for me, the anatomy of an apology is acknowledgement. I did this, I messed up, I'm bearing witness to it. Emotional uptake. Your feelings are valid, you're entitled to feel them for as long as you feel them at the intensity that you feel them and the emotion that you name. I know I can talk really fast. Center the hurt, and it's not about our feelings of guilt. Like, you know what, you ever apologize to someone and someone's apologizing to, but you have to hold their hand throughout the whole process? Like, I just feel so guilty. It's like, super glad, Barb, you hurt me, and now we get to talk about your feelings all afternoon. And then accountability and change behavior. And stop giving me irrelevant context. My cat was sick, and I'm normally such a good ally. Are you, though? And then lastly, divest from forgiveness. I know it's missing an S. Don't talk to me about it. It's very upsetting for me. But divesting from forgiveness is really important to me because it's about reconciliation and about healing the harm we've caused, whether or not we get forgiven. I'm going to leave you with 3 short lines that remind me about the importance of the work that I do and why I do it, which is to heal all of us, hopefully. This is from a poem I wrote, and it goes like this. Show me everywhere that you are soft, and I promise to make you softer still. Thank you so much.